presentation. So first off, welcome everybody. I am so happy to have everybody here for our webinar on data literacy terms and concepts. This webinar is part of a series that I'll be doing all of 2022 and maybe into 2023, all on data literacy. Data literacy, while as a concept, it's emerging in our industry. Really, for those of us who've been in data management a long time, it's something we have grappled with for decades. So this is just a background slide on EW Solutions. Here's my background slide. Please, if you have any questions for me after this presentation, I included my email here just in case you needed to contact me for anything. So I have so much to talk about. Oh goodness, this is far too large of a list. But going to talk today briefly about data literacy for the individual, which will take us into the 6 types of data literate thinking, which are critical for anybody who works with data. Then we'll go into what it looks like to have a data literate organization. For those of you who've been with us on this journey, you'll see a slide that you have seen before, but it's really one of my favorite slides to talk about data literacy. And then, you know, if I'm going to do a series on data literacy, we have to deal with the hard stuff, the stuff that we don't really want to grapple with. And these are our basic data literacy concepts like inference, null hypothesis, statistical significance, and a host of others. With that, let's dive in. By the way, do not hesitate to ask questions. Anne-Marie's favorite time in her life is when she can interrupt me in the middle of a thought and jump in with a question. You will make her day. It'll just, you cannot make her any happier than that. And I will tell you that this should be a fun webinar because, little secret, after this, I get to have a 5-day weekend, which is a rare occurrence. That's rarer than a unicorn. So I cannot wait for that, but I'm thrilled to be with all of you today. So let's get into this. So because data literacy is a little bit of a newer concept, I just want to take a moment to go through a good definition of it. When we talk about data literacy, we are talking about the ability to create, manage, read, work with, and analyze data to ensure and maximize its accuracy, trust, and value to an organization. Companies, almost every organization wants to be more data literate. I don't think I've ever worked with an organization that didn't want to be data driven. Guess what? If your data literacy is low, if you don't understand how to create, manage, read, work with, and argue and analyze with data, you're never going to become data driven. Hence the growth of data literacy. Let me continue. We talk about data literacy for the individual. We are talking about a data literate person can understand their data. They can find and obtain the data they need for the stated purpose that they need it for. They can read, interpret, and evaluate data. They know what the data is indicating and what it's not indicating. They can read, interpret, and evaluate it. They know how to manage their data and create real insights using data and our data sets. So this is just a high level of what a data literate person can do. And when we look at data literate thinking, we're really talking about 6 types of thinking. Critical thinking. What do we mean by this? So at one time, in the long ago, in the time that has been forgotten, critical thinking was taught in schools. And I mean at grade school and high school level. Critical thinking is being open to different assumptions and conclusions and being willing to adopt new ideas and perspectives on a subject. It really is the ability to look at something and not just take it as its face value. I would argue that in the world, in the time of the internet, where everybody uses a search engine to look something up, critical thinking has never been more important. One of the jokes I use with people who quote something from a website, I go, "What? Where'd you find that?" "Oh, on the web." "Well, then it's got to be true." Just like a newspaper. Exactly. Anne-Marie laughing shows the insanity of that. Critical thinking, I just take a little sidebar off the data literacy track. I think if I were to point to one or two things in my career that I think has been the most valuable, critical thinking would rank in that top two or three things. That's how seminal it is. Because just trusting what you find somewhere, you can't do that. I can think of an example. I'm probably taking too much time on critical thinking, but I'll share with you one. Working with an insurance company, building a data warehouse for them. The head of the program, he had an analyst report, and he picked the top tool in each category blindly, no evaluation, just said, I'm going to buy each one of these. So he had the most expensive database software running on the most expensive piece of hardware money can buy, with the most expensive ETL tool at the time, along with the most expensive front-end tool at the time. How much data were they managing in that data warehouse? You would think many, many terabytes. No, I think it was 2.3 gigabytes of data. I mean, I have a, I have a little flash drive here that in my desk that holds more than 10 times that amount, probably 100 times that amount. They spent millions and millions. Why? No critical thinking. He just accepted what was in the analyst report and just picked them blind. Not a good way to do it. Anyway, that's enough on critical thinking. What about scientific thinking? Scientific thinking is the knowledge of the scientific method and principles and the ability to apply a scientific approach to formulate and test a hypothesis. We were joking earlier about Anne-Marie loving her dissertation. Again, that's a clear sign of insanity. But if you ever have the opportunity to write a dissertation, I have had that opportunity. I know some of the folks who joined us today have had that opportunity. You are forced to learn the scientific method. You are forced to understand what is bias and how do you. So you learn that you can never prevent all of the bias, but how do you really mitigate it based on the techniques you're using? Scientific thinking is equally important in a data-driven culture. So it's such an important way of thinking. Statistical thinking, knowledge of how statistics work and how to apply them, and to use quantitative reasoning. What's quantitative reasoning? Wow, I sound so smart when I use that term. When you see the word quantitative, think quantity. It's a number. It's something you can count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's something you can add, subtract, multiply, divide. That's what quantitative is. Quantity think. Anyway, visual thinking. This is the ability to understand and interpret information conveyed in a visualization or some visual means. Maybe it's a graph or a chart or something else. I will share with you later on. I don't know if it'll be this year, but if not, early next year, I will be doing an entire webinar just on the 19 types of graphs and visualizations in data literacy. So don't miss that one. It's such a meat and potatoes type of topic, but it is important because not all visualizations are meant for the same purposes. They all have pros and cons. Anyway, skepticism, a willingness to question the data and go beneath the surface to understand the context that it's being created or presented. You know, when you have people who are not really data literate, when somebody sends them a set of data and they start using it to make business decisions, no questions asked. They just move forward and start making those decisions. What a dangerous approach. And I've seen this many, many times. In fact, it's what the norm in my career. The last type of thinking, data literate thinking I want to bring up is maybe the most neglected one, ethical thinking. When we work and use data, we need to really look at what is the potential good or harm in any actions or conclusions from this data set. And we want to prevent that. It would be impossible. I could take up hours describing organizations that fail to think ethically. And when their customers find that out, they tend to leave because, hey, you didn't guard my data, you didn't safeguard it, you actually published it in some way that really that bothered me, and was now, with all the different privacy laws, was probably illegal was probably illegal nowadays too. Ethical thinking, something that has been missed for a long time, and it really is an important part of data literate thinking. All right, let's talk about data literacy for the organization. I have gone through this slide before, but I don't think I can go through it enough times. So many organizations want to be data literate. And when they look at themselves, they don't really even know what that means. They could read my definition and, oh, it's lovely prose, is it not? Almost straight from William Shakespeare himself. But really, I almost got Anne Marie on that one. Anyway, it's Macbeth, Macbeth, and my definition for data literacy. Anyway, those are very different. So when we look, though, at really what makes an organization data literate, I use this chart. First off, a data literate organization must adhere to data privacy and security, not only regulations, but also doing what's right, making sure that we are safeguarding our information in an ethical, proper manner. A data literate organization invests significantly in data governance. In fact, I would argue if you don't have a top tier data governance program, I don't really see how you can be data literate. Great data governance programs ensures that our data is accurate and timely and consistent and has an authoritative source, is reasonable, well-defined, has the correct syntax and the right formats. My goodness, what do they not do? Data governance does so much, and data literate organizations adhere to this. If you have inaccurate data, you're not data literate because you really can't trust it. Anyway, let me continue. The data literate organization has invested in metadata management. I will tell you, I've done data management for, I actually don't want to name how many. Oh gosh, Anne Marie, what? That's so sad. I mean, when that number popped into my head, I was like, wow, that's a rough one. Anyway, it has been a long time, and one of the things that's so seminal is metadata management is the technical backbone of data management and data literacy. If you do not have a exceptional metadata management capability, don't think that you're data literate, because it really provides that backbone. Anne-Marie, I just thought of a time when you and I were speaking to an insurance company. They were Midwest with a little bit of East Coast thrown in on them. I think you know I'm going to talk about. They really thought they had studied the field of data management and data governance, and they didn't know until we spoke with them that you need metadata management.
I remember this.
You know who I'm thinking. You know who I'm thinking of. Anyway.
Actually, we just had a comment. Actually, a question but it was put in the chat. Is metadata management really involved in a data catalog? And does a data catalog support data literacy?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think there were 3 questions there. So when we look at metadata management, I'll try to summarize this. A data catalog has really grown in concept over the years. So when you think of a full data catalog, we're thinking of several major components. The 3 that popped to mind immediately. One is a data dictionary. Think of this as your technical metadata. It gives you the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your data. If you're wondering, wow, he's going through metadata management quickly, have no fear. I know we have a webinar on this topic. Go to our YouTube channel and you will find it. But let me continue. Also, a great data catalog will have a business glossary, enterprise level business glossary, which will be based on your domain model. A good domain model is the 7 to 12 domains, including subdomains, of your enterprise. And then third is robust functionality for your glossary and your dictionary. This can be things like enterprise search. So we have a client partner today where we're doing all the data management, but we've rolled out a metadata management tool and we're building that tool out. And it's so fascinating because they're doing some really complex things, and they're able to type in common English words like fence date, engine drawing, these just basic terminology, and quickly, within seconds, search their environment. That's what great data catalogs do. They have those enterprise searches, they have data quality rules, and so much more. Oh goodness, I could have, whoever asked that question, I could spend an hour on it, but I'll give you those three components. Big time metadata management functionality and capabilities combined with a data dictionary, an integrated data dictionary with a business glossary. They must be integrated. Let me continue. The data literate organization invests in data science. I think as we go through this data literacy course, you'll see where sometimes I differentiate data science from regular analytics or analysis. They do differ because really in data science, we are testing hypotheses. We're pushing the boundaries of data. We're not just showing a report that says, we sold 40 widgets to this customer today. No, we're going to be a little more complex than that. Anyway, the data literate organization has decision makers who understand how to access their data sources, work with the data, interpret it, and avoid common data analysis errors. There are tons of those errors that can happen when we really don't understand how to use our data. Let me keep going. My goodness. Advanced analytics, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and visualization. These are all ingredients of the soup that is decision support and advanced data-driven decision-making. These are all ingredients that make a fine soup. Anyway, the data literate organization has invested in an executive individual for their CDO, Chief Data Officer. So I've seen too many organizations. The CDO is a small C, not a big C. So guess what? They have no budget. They're a team of one, or maybe they have a junior person. That's not an executive. That's not a C level. Good data literate organizations have a C level Chief Data Officer. Last but not least, data literate organizations have defined their data ethics because they want to run their business in an ethical manner. It saves a lot of headaches and fines along the way. Let me keep going. I could spend so much more time on this. We have to get to our basic concepts and terms. So I'm going to go through these. If anybody has questions, let me know. But I want to hit this basic stuff that is so important in data literacy. So first off, when you hear the term inference, this is the process of drawing conclusions about a population. When you hear the word population, think our set of data based on a sample of that data. And so it's very easy to say, hey, I want to do a study. How much more ice cream do people eat when the weather is above 90 degrees as opposed to when it's below? What data set should I use? Oh, I think I want to use everybody in the world for that. Well, guess what? That's going to be a really expensive analysis, assuming you could even get those statistics. It would take just a stunning amount of time. But you find out really your company's only located in the United States, and they predominantly do business on the East Coast. So maybe what we'd rather do is limit our sample, our data set to East Coast, and then take a subset of it. Maybe instead, so on the East Coast there are many millions of people, tens of millions, maybe over 100 million. I did not look up that statistic before coming up with this example. Do we need to survey 100 million people? Heck no. How about 1,000 or 2,000? We're using a sample, and then whatever conclusions we come with from that sample, that's our inference. We're assuming that sample is representative of the whole, and whatever conclusions we find, we will infer that they are applicable to the entire set. Let me keep going. A null hypothesis. This assumes there is no statistical importance between two variables of a hypothesis. So what the heck did I just say? What did statistical importance mean? What the heck is a hypothesis? So when you're a data scientist, you're testing hypotheses. I believe that if the weather is warmer, more people will eat ice cream. And I define warmer as breaking 90 degrees or more. So sounds great, right? The null hypothesis, so to try to remove bias, your hypothesis could be this, that when it's above 90 degrees, people eat more ice cream. But when you actually test your data, you need to first start with a null hypothesis, meaning we're going to assume that there is no statistical importance between two variables, in this case, temperature and amount of ice cream consuming. So you always want to start with a null hypothesis rather than starting with an alternative hypothesis and proving that. So much like in the United States, you are innocent until proven guilty. So the starting point is innocence unless the evidence based on jury of your peers concludes something else. It's our starting point. Any good analysis by a data scientist starts with a null hypothesis, and you must disprove it rather to prove out that you really have something. So super important. Statistical significance. It's a number that expresses the probability that the result of a given experiment, think analysis, could have come purely by chance. You know what? We're looking at 1,000 people. We're looking at 100 people. What's our margin for error is another way you see it, where maybe even though this study seems to definitively prove something or show a correlation, there's still a margin for error. And guess what? Your margin for error is almost never zero. So if you have an analysis, you say margin for error is zero. Yeah, probably not the best done. Right, Amber? I mean, I'm trying to think, even if you did study the entire population in a set, you still have a margin for error, because if you do a survey, you don't know that they're telling you the truth, right? I mean, you always have one. Anyway, data wrangling or data munging. Oh, goodness. One of the things that drives me batty is when we create new terms for old stuff. But anyway, these terms are commonly used in analysis, and it's really talking about the process of extracting, transforming, and mapping data from one format into another format. And really the objective is to make the data high quality and suitable for downstream processes like analytics. Really, this sounds just like ETL in my mind, because it's what we do in a data warehouse. So whether you have an ETL process, a data wrangling process, or an ingestion process, kind of trying to do the same thing most of the times. Anyway, let me keep going. Signal. Signal is meaningful information in a data set. So I will continue. So it is over 90 degrees where I'm at today. So this whole warm weather plus ice cream example is resonating with me today. So signal is meaningful information in the data set. So when you look at a set of data, you have to say, hey, what is meaningful in this? What is something that is telling us something? So if in your data set of temperature plus, does that equal more ice cream being eaten? If our data set also has the color of the person's shirt, I'm actually wearing a white polo today, I would probably guess that the color of my polo shirt has nothing to do with the
David,
ice cream today. Yes.
David?
Yes.
And you didn't change slides. You're still on the
I'm
slide.
Sorry. I'm so sorry, Anne-Marie. Thank you. Noise. Noise is the random, unwanted variation or fluctuation that distracts from the relevant information, our signal. So anytime we have a set of data, what we'd like to do is eliminate the noise. Think of, what does noise do? Distract you. Same thing in a set of data. Whatever information in our data set that is distracting us from our hypothesis, we want to get rid of. We want to focus on the signal. Bad visualizations have noise in them. Good visualizations focus the viewer's attention on the signal. So remember that. Data democratization. Data democratization is a principle that states that data should be available to everyone in each organization, not just our analysts, but all. It's very warm, cuddly, and fuzzy. Let us all have access to the data through self-service and other means. It sounds so great. And it is, in many cases it is, but you better do it right. I will tell you right now, if you don't have high levels of literacy and governance within your organization, you're gonna have problems with this. A lot of data democratization efforts fail in such basic things like masking PII, personally identifiable information, PHI, personal health information, and lots of other things that could get your company and organization in a lot of trouble. So maybe people are taking that data that they're getting in their self-service and replicating it all over the place and using it for decision making. That can become very problematic. So data democratization done right is amazing. Done wrong with no controls, no governor switches, causes problems. Anyway, let me continue if I may. Frequency, it's the number of occurrences of a repeating event per unit of time. For example, how many tables were purchased that were blue for each month of a year? So it's just how many, it's a counting, it's number. Correlations, a relationship or connection between two signals. In my ice cream example, my signals were temperature and amount of ice cream eaten. Those were my signals. So I would be looking to see, is there a correlation or some pattern between those two signals in my analysis? This is a good overview of a lot of the basic concepts in data literacy. I hope I didn't make it too painful. Let me continue forward. Let's talk about the differences. So if we're analyzing data, many times you'll be, I don't want to say vastly, but you'll be alternating between explanatory analysis and exploratory analysis. What do these mean? Well, let's figure it out. So when we talk about exploratory analysis, this is really what a data scientist or a data analyst does to get familiar with the data. So you've pulled a data set, you have a hypothesis you want to test, or maybe you're starting to form one. We're going to kind of play with the data a little bit, start testing it for this question or hypothesis and mine it and really see, is there good information here? Are we finding a signal and a correlation within our signals that really are helping our analysis and maybe need to be dove into at a deeper level? So a good analogy here is maybe you turn over 100 rocks just hoping to find one or two precious gemstones. Would be a good analysis here. So we're mining in the data. We're trying to find something really of value here. Explanatory analysis typically comes after exploratory. This happens when an analyst or scientist has something specific that they want to present to our business users. And really, dirty secret of analytics that nobody ever talks about it. You build analytics to modify behavior. That's what data-driven is. We have found something valuable, and we want to modify how people do their job. Why build a visualization if everyone's just going to do their job the exact same way they would do it, whether or not they had the visualization? Let me get that mic a little bit closer. Anyway, so explanatory analysis happens when we have something that we really want to show to our business users, something that we think is compelling. In the analogy I did of turning over the 100 rocks, here, we're not going to show our business users 100 rocks. We're going to show them those one or two precious gemstones that we found. All right. Standard derivation. Let's talk about that. All right. Standard derivation is the average amount of variability. What does variability mean? It means difference in your data set. On average, it's how far each value lies from the mean. When you say mean, it means middle. Think middle. So it's like the average of whatever it is we're trying to measure. Standard derivations can be less than one. So imagine you're analyzing the number of apples eaten by kids each day by county in the state of Illinois. The standard derivation between the counties will most likely be below one. So I could tell you, growing up in the city of Chicago, there weren't a whole lot of apples being eaten, but per kid, at least that I remember in school. But maybe in more rural areas, which 95% of Illinois is very rural, maybe many more were eaten. High standard derivation, when you hear this term, is when whatever these values are far from one another. So maybe the number of apples eaten each day by a kid in Chicago, kid being defined as somebody between the ages of, A and B, 5 and 8. Maybe in Chicago, the amount of apples being eaten is 2.2 per day. However, in the rural areas down south, maybe it's 1.1 being eaten per day. That's a high standard derivation where there's a lot of distance between these two values. Low would be, hey, in Chicago, we eat 0.2 apples per day, and downstate, 0.25. That's low, very little distance. All right. Normal distribution. This will be, I think, our last concept in this deck. And then I see a lot in the chat. I think we probably have quite a few questions. Normal distribution. This is when I mentioned that bell curve earlier, so I have to tell you, I love normal distribution. Back when I was a student, I so loved it when the teacher said, we're going to grade on a bell curve, especially after the midterm where everybody screwed up. That was music to my ears because that meant that my grade would move on up. So normal distribution is a concept where data is symmetrically distributed without any skew. So what the heck does that mean? It means that we are going to cut this data in half, and we're going to make sure that all the different points that we're measuring, that we have as many points on one side of this curve as we do on the other. So it's symmetrical and actually ends up being a bell shape. So if you fold it in half, the two sides match one another. By the way, when you see the word mean, it means median. In a normal distribution, 68% of the data falls between -1 and +1 from the mean. And 95% of your data should fall between -2 and +2. This is a classic bell curve that probably all of us have seen. So with that, I'm just going to give a couple closing comments, and then Anne-Marie, hit me with the questions. I see a bunch of stuff in the chat. When we're looking at data literacy, there is so much here that maybe, again, takes us back to our university days or our high school days, if you went to a really fine high school. The good news is you don't have to be an expert at all this stuff. A person can be data literate and not understand that a bell curve is 68% of the people fall between -1 and +1, all this stuff. The average person at a company may not need to know that. If you're a data scientist or a business analyst, then you probably do. So I wanted to cover these basic meat and potatoes concepts. With that, Anne-Marie, hit me with your best shot. Give me your best questions.
Okay, David, we have some, as you saw, a lot of things in the chat. Not any questions posed yet in Q&A, but a lot of questions posed in chat. And one question was a whole thread on data ethics. Not the topic of this presentation. We actually have a webinar on our completed webinars site on the datamanagementu.com, the webinar section. There's a webinar on data ethics, but a bunch of questions about how data ethics are developed in an organization, how they apply to data literacy. Are there examples of data ethics policies available? So all of that was a major part of the thread of the chat today. Would you like to address any of that?
I absolutely would. So when you look at data ethics, too many companies take it from the standpoint of what the heck does GDPR require? What does CCPA require? And we'll kind of try to hit that. That's a minimum bar. Great data ethics are proactive. So I can tell you, in the United States, there are many states, not just California, who have data privacy and security rules. California, Virginia, Colorado, Texas, Nevada, and I'm just going off the top of my head, and many more. I even think in Illinois we may even have some coming up, or they're moving through, our Congress. So when I share that, there will be a national data security and privacy law at some point in time, similar, I would think, to GDPR. It's not if, it's when. So before the pandemic, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, had their own version of GDPR. And there were differences, but really it's kind of the same goals. I think all of us, the average citizen, we do think our data should be secured. It should be kept private. I don't know about you, but if I purchase from a company and I have to give them my email address, and I'm now getting spammed into the ground with a bunch of companies that I've never interacted with, and they're all new spam, I know it's happened. It's been sold. Simple as that. And I would say that's pretty darn unethical, if you ask me. So I do think in the formation of your data ethics policies, definitely you can begin, notice the word begin with the legislation that you do have to adhere to. However, I want you to keep in mind the two things. First off, when it comes to legislation, none of these legislative laws really have great definitions of what's PII and what isn't. I'll give you an example. In November of last year, the definition for PII for CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act, was way more granular, way more inclusive than the examples that were given in GDPR. As a result, what you have to do when you look at concepts like PII is not just target it for a single piece of legislation, but make sure that it could cover any of the known legislations that are applicable to you. Again, this is bare minimum. The second thing you should ask is, what should we be doing? What is the right thing to do? So even though we can sell data and make 1% revenue on it, and yeah, we even have something where you opt in, and that covers it from a FIPS perspective. FIPS is, again, guidelines from the US government of how you should ask people to opt in or opt out of data sharing. The question though comes in is that even the right thing to do? So even if they opt in, what about all the people who maybe clicked that a little bit quickly and didn't realize what they were agreeing to? Maybe we don't even want that exposure. Maybe it's just not worth it as a company. So really looking at these larger ethical issues, and I can tell you, just because we have a couple minutes, I'm going to pontificate it a little bit.
And we have one more question, David, after you're finished.
No problem. Then I'll pontificate a lot of it. I am waiting for an intelligent company to realize that this is an issue that is universal, I think, across our country. Who the heck wants their data sold? By the way, if you do, I can give you the address of a website that could show how many times your data has been pasted on other websites for hackers and rotten people to use for spamming. I can also show you how many times it's been part of a data breach. There's actually websites to track that. My personal email, the one I use, my corporate one, part of over, last time I checked, 13 breaches. Not good, not good. So I would suggest that a really intelligent company would be more determined to protect the data of their customers. And really, that could be a great marketing tool, especially if you sell higher end products like insurance, especially to corporations, that this could be a real selling point in your organization. So with ethics, they have to be business driven. So some of it was, where do you start? I mentioned, hey, the regulations should be your lowest baseline of how you're starting. But then talk to your business people, talk to the head of sales, talk to the head of marketing, talk to the head of production, whatever it is you make or sell, whether it's a service or a product. Find out what they think, along with your IT department who really deal in this. You may find huge breaches. I could tell you there was a company we were working with who they build gorgeous accessories, so high-end clothing accessories. In that world, design is critical. And, they had certain protocols, but in the main design floor where all their new stuff's being built, one of the walls was a window, the whole wall. And you could look and see this apartment building 2 blocks away that was much higher than this window. And I couldn't help but think, if you were a competitor of this company, you send Johnny to the hotel with a telescope that you can buy for $200, and you can see every design that your competitor is working on for next season. Not a very good idea. Anyway, so I hope that helps you get started. Make sure your ethics are business requirements driven. Get your business involved, pull them, and hey, don't be afraid to do a survey of a subset of your customers. Maybe let's do a survey, some kind of vehicle to gauge their opinions on different things, and then really act on them. Great question.
I would say that as the executive editor of datamanagementu.com, anybody interested in developing a data ethics policy should go to the completed webinar section and review the webinar on data ethics. In that webinar is a set of slides that develops a data ethics policy that can be used by any organization. There are also a few good articles on datamanagementu.com in the data management section on data ethics development, benefits, challenges, etc. We have a couple questions. One is from some of our PhDs, and they want to know whether it's standard deviation, standard derivation, or if the two terms are used interchangeably.
Yes, great question. I've been hit with this one before. I am not a statistical professor, so I will be glad to have somebody correct me. But I have always said standard derivation. But if you think about what the word deviation means, maybe. But I've always used derivation. I hope I said it that way and didn't just slur it as I went over the term. But great question. Probably better for an analytics, a statistical professor. But fun nonetheless.
As I said before, the slides are available on the datamanagementu.com webinar registration page. Every webinar has a registration page. The slides are available there. It says download slides PDF. And there's a question about, pardon?
Oh, I just saw there was a question about how you start a data literacy program.
I was just about to say that. Go right ahead.
Great question. So first off, I think that your best beginning is to go watch your other videos as well, because I'm developing these concepts across quite a few. But let me kind of give you some guidelines. The first thing you have to ask, how big is our bread box? How many employees, how many staff need to be data literate at some level? So your janitor, it probably doesn't need to be data literate, most likely. Maybe your company's unique, but probably not. So how many people really need to be data literate? Now, I don't mean an expert. I just mean somebody who understands the basic concepts of questioning your data, the things you're going to ask about, people who use data to make decisions. If you only have 20, 30, 40 people, that's a very different solution than with some, like we're working with an organization now who has over 5,000 people. And when you talk about a solution for an organization of 5,000, 10,000, well, and actually that group, it could go as high as 25,000. So depending on partners and bringing in these other entities. So their solution is going to look quite different than an organization with 20 or 30 people who use data in their daily jobs. So you have to first ask yourself, how big is our data literacy breadbox? How many people really do we need to upgrade? So the way you start this program is first off, start answering those questions. I will tell you if you have a smaller group, maybe if you're in that 20, 30, 40, maybe your data literacy program is ongoing education where you have somebody come in, teach a course on it, something tailored to your company. I think that's always the best way to go. But when you're at these really 500 or more, you really need to have a different approach. We have actually the only approach in the industry on how to do that. We automate the whole thing. We have automated assessments. And actually, the time remaining, I probably can't even walk through it all, but you can automate the entire process and have analytics around it. And that's really the right way to do it. Anytime you have really north of 500 people, you better start thinking about that approach. If you have 1,000 or more, forget face-to-face training. That cost will be too large and be ineffective. You really need, that top tier type of automated data literacy program. That's what we're building. We're building this right now for two customers. So it's an exciting time. With that, Anne Marie, I don't know if we have a fast question, but I think we only have about 5 or 6 minutes left.
We don't have any more questions, David. Actually, no. Actually, Peter just posed a question. In an organization, what's the relationship between data literacy program scope and the data-informed decision-making, decision support scope? Are there any rules of thumb there? Thanks, Peter Sprung.
Peter, very nice question. There is absolutely some good rules of thumb. I'll share with you one of them because I'm living this today. We have a client partner who really they've never had a real data warehouse, not even a fake data warehouse, being quite honest. So that's something that we're doing a lot of other programs for them right now. But in 2023, we're going to start the process of building them a data warehouse. Once we start that process, and we're now exposing our data in ways we haven't before throughout the organization, our data literacy program needs to be coming shortly thereafter. It really does. When you have people using data to make real live, meaningful corporate decisions, then you need to be data literate. You need to get people who are more sophisticated working with and managing that data. So Peter, I love the question you asked because it's so true that there is a correlation between the two. If you already are at an organization that uses analytics extensively, then you need to get your data literacy program moving most likely, especially if you believe that there is a gap in our data literacy knowledge. I'll give you a good example of this. At one manufacturer we were working with years ago, their chief merchandising officer. So this is the dude making the big decisions. He looked at me dead in the eyes live, and he said, I don't really look at the data in our data warehouse. I look and see what Kim Kardashian says on Twitter, and that's how I make our decisions. The guy's the chief merchandising officer. Last time I checked, Kim Kardashian wasn't. The fact that he is ignoring the data is terrifying to me. Now, there were reasons their data warehouse was not well built, but that's a terrifying concept. And when you looked at their sales over the previous 6 years, sales were declining steadily, as was profit margin per sale. So that's a killer combination and not in a good way. So excellent question. Anne Marie, I'm going to turn it back to you. I'm going to stop sharing, turn it back to you, and let you take us home.
Thank you, David. What an interesting series of questions. And that leads me to my ending comments. What I'd like to do is remind everyone that we will have another webinar the last Thursday in July, which is I think around the 27th of July. And we will be talking about data literacy return on investment. So for people who are asking about how to start a data literacy program, you really want to tune into this one because it'll give you the basis for justifying a data literacy initiative. Once again, all the webinar slides for every webinar DMU runs are available on the datamanagementu.com website in the section webinars. And we've had several interesting discussions in chat today. I'd like to continue them on the Data Management U LinkedIn webpage. The Data Management U page on LinkedIn will start to post these questions. Please participate, ask more questions. We're going to do this monthly for each one of the DMU webinars to keep the discussion flowing. Some really good points here today. And if you are interested in learning more about data literacy, shameless plug for datamanagementeducation.com, where there is an excellent 19 or 20 chapter course on data literacy. Thank you all. Please come back next time for our next session on the Data Literacy Mastery Series. And thank you again to David and all the attendees. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.